It's Talk to Me, the Soul Series with Oprah Winfrey.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talk to Me. I'm Oprah, and I'd like to thank you for continuing to join me here on our Soul Series on XM 156. One of my favorite things to talk about in life is how we got to be who we are, manifested in this body, and the higher consciousness that has led us to this place. Over the last several months, with an array of spiritual teachers, we've had the opportunity to delve into many facets of our being, our spirit, the soul, from Gary Zukav's premise that we achieve authentic power in aligning our personalities with our soul, which is something that I know have found to be true, to Dr. Tobin Hart's insight into the secret spiritual lives of children, which was fascinating, because children come into the world and they come trailing the vapors from the other world. It's so wonderful to know that, especially for those of you who have children. We cracked the soul's code just a bit with Dr. James Hillman. We interpreted the law of attraction with Esther Hicks and Michael Ozier, and with Susan Chernak McElroy. We embraced the deep soul connection that we all share with our animal companions. Those are just some of the people we've been talking to over the past several weeks in our soul series. Well, one aspect of the soul we have yet to explore that I had infinitely found fascinating is the idea that there exists ascending levels of consciousness. Stay with me, people. A sort of ladder of spiritual enlightenment on which our souls can be measured, a consciousness map. And I came to this theory, this idea, as presented by Dr. David R. Hawkins. I read a book not too long ago called Power versus Force. And Dr. Hawkins says there also exists a defensible, scientifically based method that confirms the reality of spiritual truth. Dr. Hawkins is an author. He is a spiritual teacher who is on the leading edge of consciousness research, though best known for his book that I just someone presented me with several weeks ago. He's best known for Power versus Force, The Hidden Determinants of Human Behavior, but has written many other books. His sixth and most recent release in this progressive series is called Discovery of the Presence of God. So I'm really happy that Dr. Hawkins can join us from Phoenix, warm, sunny Phoenix, Arizona today. Welcome to Talk to Me.
Very, very nice to be here and speak with you.
Well, I am, the way life works, things come into your life as you are prepared to receive them.
Yes.
That happens. I've been studying many other authors and spiritual material for the past 20 years, and I had not come across your book. I guess I just wasn't prepared or ready for it until recently. But as I just said, I found it infinitely fascinating, your first book, Power versus Force. And for all of our many listeners who are, as I was until several weeks ago, not familiar with your esteemed work, I'd like for you to begin with the story that you told in the, preface or introduction of the book. How back in the day, as I say today, you were a paper boy in rural Wisconsin, and there came a storm. Can you start there?
The onset of my life was somewhat unusual. I remember everything was a complete blank until suddenly at age 3. At age 3, suddenly it was like Klieg lights got turned on in a dark stadium. From nothingness, suddenly I went into the shock of realizing I existed. So at age 3, I'm pondering, is the highest truth existence or non-existence? And
I know I read that. That's in like the opening pages, and I went, what kind of 3-year-old were you?
Well, I was a precocious 3-year-old,
So you actually remember at age 3 having those thoughts about existence versus non-existence and fearing that,
yes.
If there was an is, then is not is also.
That's correct.
Yeah.
It's a very stunning confrontation.
As a 3-year-old.
And it took me 35 years to solve it, to transcend that level of consciousness.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to presume that many of our listeners are, as I was several weeks ago, they haven't read the book. So I'm going to presume that most people haven't read the book. So I'm going to speak to you as a person who has read it, but I'm asking the questions for people who have not.
Yes,
so
indeed. That
story about being a paper boy, you said that you were in rural Wisconsin. You had a 17-mile route. I thought that was pretty extensive. How old were you then with the paper route?
12, around there.
12 years old. And it was winter in Wisconsin, as we know, can be brutal. And you were caught miles from home in a blizzard, and the temperature, as we know, can drop, with wind chill to below zero. And at this time, I think you said it was 20 degrees below zero.
Extremely cold, and it was pitch black. And my paper route was 18 miles long. I still was miles from home, and the wind was so cold, I had to find a shelter from the cold. But I was out in the barren stretches of farmland. But the snow is piled up by the plows over the winter in Wisconsin, and by that time the snow on the side of the highway was probably 8 feet high. So what I did is I broke through the crust of the snow, and I quickly dug a little hole in the snow just to get out of the wind. And so I climbed into this refuge, and almost instantly a state overcame me that makes me weep if I think about it now. A suffusion of love beyond all description. Also, it was timeless, and it was exquisite. It was also the core of who I was. It was more who I was than the personal self. And this experience lasted for infinite time. And I knew that was my reality. And what melted the personal self into sort of almost non-existence was the infinite power of the love. The love was overwhelming.
Also, so were you dying? When I read that, I was thinking what you described there was what some people call near-death experience. So had you gotten so cold that you were dying?
No, it wasn't near death. It was like a miraculous relief from the ferocity of the cold wind. The personal self dissolved into that which is more yourself. In spiritual languaging, it's self with a capital S instead of self with a small s. Mm-hmm. And later my father came and found me in this. It was a state of bliss, and my father came to get me. Also, I realized I did not have to come, reactivate the body or reactivate human life. You're free to leave, and that's happened to me many times. Even now, you can leave anytime you like. But my father came and found me finally, and he shook my leg. And at that moment, I had to decide: would I reown this life, reactivate this body? And I knew if I allowed myself to leave the body, he would think I had died, and spend his life in grief. I couldn't do that to my father.
Yeah, you say in the book that there was a great reluctance to return to your body and all that entailed, but because you love your father dearly and because of you could feel his anguish or see his anguish.
He would have felt that he had left me and that I had died because he believed in death. Well, in that state, you realize that death is not a possibility, but to the person in a mortal body, they presume there is such a thing. So I reactivated the body and did it for his sake, and it then
came back.
Yes, I came back to.
For lack of a better expression, you came back. Yes. What do you attribute to this happening? I asked you earlier about, was it because you described that it was so cold and icy that the wind had ripped the newspapers and that your clothes were frozen stiff? And so I was thinking that it was because you'd gotten so cold, and I've heard people talk about freezing to death where there's this warm feeling that comes over you. But no, you're saying it wasn't near death. You're saying it wasn't that.
It wasn't near death. And
so what do you attribute this feeling to?
I think some kind of a karmic spiritual destiny because other profound states came on uncalled for, not in stressful situations, in fact, in non-stressful situations that were as extreme, in fact, even more extreme, finally to the degree that I really left my life in the East, which was a very successful life, and moved out to the country where I could spend some years meditating and getting used to this altered, different state of consciousness.
I'm talking to Dr. David Hawkins about his book, Power versus Force, and he was just explaining to us, those of you who are just joining us here on XM 156, the experience he had as a young boy I don't know, would you call it out of body or really in inner body experience?
It wasn't out of body, because I have later had out of body experiences. They're quite different. No, this was an altered suffusion in which the small self disappeared into the large self, and the sense of personal self disappeared. And that happened even more so later in life. The prior sense of a personal self is never returned. Right now, I'm the witness of what is being said, but I'm not the author of it.
So is the larger self the soul?
Classically, the small self is the ego self,
right,
with a narcissistic core, and the large self is the spirit, the soul. Soul, yes. Yeah? And so it's like periodically in my life, the personal self would dissolve right into the infinite power of the spiritual self. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you never discussed that experience with anybody as a boy because you say there was no context in which to even talk about it. But after this experience, though, I understand from what I'm reading in Power versus Force, after this experience, this altered state experience that you had in the snow, after this blissful state, you describe in the book that you had gone to the depths of hell and then experienced a level of consciousness also indescribable in its bliss. You felt the presence of God, or what you called at the time in the book, the presence, this loving presence. I remember you saying that you were in love with everyone.
Oh, yes. I still am.
Okay.
Well, it took me years to learn how to handle it, because to even interact with anybody who was loving, I would break out in tears. And
really?
This is common in certain spiritual groups. There's a period you go through where anything beautiful and love makes you cry. I mean, they're speaking to you because your energy is so loving. And I could feel that same tearfulness beginning to emerge,
Oh, thank you.
I would look at
thank you for
couple
saying
in an
that.
airport. One would look at the other. You could see the tender love, and I would cry.
Well, I know. I remember reading in Power versus Force the line where you said, "As I looked at each person, myself shone forth from their eyes," and I wondered, how did I get into all these bodies?
One self, one God. Divinity is described as transcendent. That's out there elsewhere in time and place. God is immanent. In other words, the very core and source of one's existence and beingness is life, and God is the core of life, and life as we know it is the manifestation of divinity.
Well, knowing what you know, does it frustrate you that wars are still being fought in the name of religion? And people fighting over who they claim God to be and what they claim God to be? Is that frustrating to you?
No, because I see the nature of human consciousness and the purpose of our life here. This is the world of maximum opportunity, of maximum gain of positive karma and undoing of negative karma. That's old-fashioned terminology, let's say, coming from Buddhism. But to undo the negative and to achieve the positive. So this is the world.
That's what this world is for, as you see it?
Yes, this world, by many years of research, and we demonstrate this very often at lectures, is perfect as it is. If its purpose, then, is the evolution of your soul, then it's perfect. Because how could you perfect your soul if you couldn't get a chance to say no to evil and say yes to good and goodness and love?
One of the things that I love that you say is... for it's only the illusion of individuality that is the origin of all suffering. When one realizes that one is the universe, complete and at one with all that is, forever without end, then no further suffering is possible. Well, the question is, how do we all begin to realize that? In recent weeks we've just been talking about people just trying to understand that they have some control over their realities by the way they think about their lives and how, you believe that, right?
Well, you can't transcend the world till you master it. You finally, first you master the world, and then you let go your attachments to it. You let go of the desires and aversions.
One of my goals here on earth is to be, my prayer for myself is to live the highest level of consciousness possible for me, incarnated in this body with this ego in this lifetime. That is my constant And I've had that prayer for about 20 years, and I can feel myself getting closer, just in my appreciation of the simplest things, finding in the midst of,
Yes.
chaos and craziness and stuff, I can just still myself that my experience is completely different than the experience that other people are having around me. So that means I'm getting closer, right?
You're striving for unconditional love. And
Yes.
of course, it's that love you radiate out to the world. And that's why the world loves you.
Well, you say that in Power versus Force, you say that the commonplace and God are not distinct. That to live with care and kindness is all that is necessary. The rest reveals itself in due time.
Willing to be loving towards all of life and all of its expressions transforms everybody, not only your own life, but everyone around you. And it's an interesting experiment is when you go to a store or you buy a newspaper, whatever you do, you just smile lovingly at the person and see how beautiful they are as a person, and say thank you. But when you say thank you to clerks like that, a lot of them will drop their teeth. They just look at you like, huh? I mean, nobody sends them love and tells them thank you with intense gratitude, really. And they look at you with shock and surprise.
Yeah.
So you can see that it's not what you do in the world, it's what you have become. So what you have become begins to influence all of life around you. And people look forward to if you're a regular customer there, that newsstand, that guy will start to light up the minute he sees you coming down the street. It's just an amazing transformative effect that we have on others. So I encourage people to strive on this earthly plane for unconditional lovingness, unconditional love, everyone at all times.
Specifically, you say people wonder, how does one reach the state of awareness that you spoke of, long extended states of bliss that you had where you weren't even able to function in the real world sometimes.
That's right.
And I was like, as I'm reading that, I'm thinking, I want some of that, whatever that is. I want some long extended states of bliss. That's what I would like.
You get blissed out. Well, if you do spiritual work continuously, and don't forget I did it continuously, I mean nonstop, constantly surrendering everything to God and letting go, wanting to change it, to either avoid it or to desire to crave it or to resist it. So eventually what happens is rather profound spiritual states. You read about them in the book, that's one thing. But they begin to spontaneously occur, and they can pretty much take you out of the world. I mean, the infinite peace, it's beyond joy and ecstasy. I was into joy. I was into ecstasy. And everything has to be surrendered to God.
That's a drug also, so you have to clarify. You were into ecstasy in the purest sense, not the drug.
Yeah, it was an emotion of a joy.
Because you've never taken drugs? Have you never taken drugs?
No, that had nothing to do with that.
Okay, because some of the things you described sounded like a drug trip. I was thinking, well, I wonder what that was he was on.
Well,
but
that's
nothing.
why now you've got the secret of why drugs are happy. Hardly anybody knows why drugs are addicting, but I know.
Why?
It's because the levels of consciousness at the highest are joy and ecstasy. What a drug does is sedate the lower levels of consciousness, the ordinary anxiety, fear, guilt. And the drug sedates the lower levels of consciousness and allows you to experience the reality of what you truthfully are.
Yeah.
And that is infinite joy and peace and existence. So then the person, because they're naive, thinks, it's the drug that did that. It is not the drug that did that. It's the drug that blotted out what was drowning it out, and now you experience the reality of who you really are. Now the thing is, how can you reach that state without the drugs? By letting go of the lower levels of consciousness, hate, guilt, fear, shame, avarice, all those things, you see.
How do we do that? How do we do that? Yeah. So this is great now. We can just stay focused work. Here. Yeah, that spiritual work, that heightened state of awareness that you're talking about. And you say that you share your own experiences with us in the book, and note that few follow the steps because they're so simple. First, you say we have to have the intense desire to reach that state.
Yes,
and then,
that may be inborn. That may be inborn. That drive to know God, to reach a divine state, could be inborn,
Okay, so you're saying for you, I'm thinking it might have been inborn for you if you're looking at your consciousness at 3 years old and are aware that
Yes.
that's what you're looking at.
Yes, I was aware of that, yes.
Okay. The first thing is to have intense desire and then a discipline to act with constant and universal forgiveness and gentleness without exception, you say. The discipline
once you-
to act with constant and universal forgiveness and gentleness without exception.
That's it. To love everything as it is. Without
One
wanting
has to be
change it.
compassionate toward everything, including one's own self and thoughts. So
That's
not
true.
wanting a thing to be different, not wanting things to be different?
That's true.
Really?
That's true.
And
You see,
next,
then your view of the world transforms. So you say, I can remember walking down an alley in New York City that everybody would consider ugly. Bums there and rats and busted up garbage cans. But in a beatific state, it looked almost to me like an impressionistic painting. Here was this adorable old trash can, and here was this cute little rat running all over, and this old man stumbling down the stairs, and it was like stunning beauty and perfection. And I saw the perfection of all that exists, and that the reason we can't see it is man projects onto everything is judgmental perception. If you remove your perception, you'll see that everything that exists is absolutely perfect. One of the easiest places to see this is nature. So you say, well, there's weeds and those are flowers. But when you reach a certain state of stop trying to change the world, you look at the weed and you suddenly see a weed is a stunning piece of sculpture. You just grab the nearest piece of weed out in the garden and look at it. It's stunning perfection. It's sculpture. No human could do that in that delicate perfection. Yeah, you see the perfection and beauty of all that shines forth. Yes,
and it's our perception of it. I got that. It's our perception of it and what we have told ourselves that a weed represents that makes us feel that a weed is less beautiful than a blooming flower.
So that's the difference between perception and essence. In other words, perception is what you project onto the world, and essence is what it really is. And of course, Socrates made that distinction and said, every man pursues only the good. It's just that he doesn't know what the real good is.
Well, yes, you should know since Socrates and Plato were your playmates.
They were
Yes.
my playmates.
What awakening do you think, or is there an awakening that is to occur from tragic episodes?
In my view of it, mankind as a race is evolutionary.
Right.
And that his consciousness is evolving over the centuries. So he
Where are we
goes
now?
up and he goes down.
Where are we now?
And don't forget, man has been at war 97% of recorded time. 97% of time. So 3% of the time he was probably too sick or too poor. I don't know. But anyway, finally,
97% of recorded time on Earth?
97% of the time. Look, the wars, the barbarians went on for centuries. You know, the East and the West were at war for well over 1,000 years. You know, the wars have been going over thousands of years. It's very, very rare for there to be no war anywhere in the world. And probably only happens during the plague. Everybody's too sick. Mm-hmm. So, man.
I'm just taking all this in. I can't refute it because I don't have any stats to refute it.
No, well, man, inherits the ego. You might say is his animal nature that he spiritually evolves and transcends. And if you think of it karmically, you know, those who deny the reality and truth of Almighty God are denying the fruits.
Is everything happening for a reason here on Earth? Do you believe?
From an infinite viewpoint, yes. It has to do with options and choices and propensity for choices, and it also has to do with quantum mechanics. It has to do with called the Zeno effect. Mm-hmm. The more often you the more often you choose a certain alternate, the more likely you are to choose that again. And by intention, consciousness affects the phenomena in the world. A scientific experiment cannot be done twice because the fact that you're observing it has already changed the outcome. So our intention for ourselves and others in the world affects the world. So your concern for them and my concern for them, all of our concern for them, alters the world, yes? Mm-hmm.
You say be passionate for God, not for belief systems.
Yes. Yes, people make an ism out of everything. You can't mention our world is so politicized. You can't mention anything in this world that somebody doesn't have a political label on it. Either left or right or something, some kind of a miserable thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So be passionate for God, not for belief systems. You say.
So because the world gets so contentious, and the book I'm working on now is called Spiritual Reality in Modern Man. The dilemma: how can man discern truth when the media and the press, everything presents a edited selection of what's going on out there, in a slanted view.
Well, it's been a joy to talk to you. I was really looking forward to talking to you because I have your books underlined and so to have an opportunity to question you about some of them, I'm glad to know it really never was a drug trip, that it was really you going to the different levels of your consciousness. And really, I feel from reading all of your books, a more enlightened being here in this present state. So thank you so much. And I loved your quote when you said, simple kindness to oneself and all that lives is the most powerful transformational force of all. So thank you for your book, Power versus Force, and for this conversation. Thanks, Dr. Hawkins.
Thank you for your service to this world.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, more Soul Series next week on XM 156. Keep on talking to me.